just chug it out of the container if you want.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the staff meeting for June 14th. I understand that we have some aging discussions this morning.
Correct.
Mr. Manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning, Commission. The staff meeting today is just a couple of topics. So Annette is here to kind of talk about, and we've touched on this in commission meetings over the last month or so, kind of where we stand on the aging contingency budget that the commission approved last year for late last year for this year. And then when that is concluded, I want to have Sheena just go to the podium and just kind of give a high-level overview of where we're at with compensation right now. I know there were some questions with some corrections staff that you all got, and kind of just give an overview of where we're at on that and what's coming at you on June 22nd at the BOCC meeting. So those are the two topics for today, sir. We'll start with aging, if that's okay.
Very good. Tim, you going to start, or is Annette? Very good. Good morning, Annette.
Morning, Commissioners. Annette Graham. So I'm bringing to you today the revised Department on Aging Contingency Fund proposal. So as we looked at these the availability of the $500,000 that are one-time only funding for 2022, what we did was focus on service gaps and the needs of older adults in the community. And we all know that those needs have been changing due to the pandemic and COVID and ongoing impact of that with the older adults in our community. At the national level, one of the things they looked at and talked about as they did surveys of all of the area agencies on aging across the United States was the impact, especially of social isolation and the ongoing impact that on physical and mental health. And it will be ongoing. They talked about the needs for transportation and health and wellness. So those are some things kind of from a very high level. We also looked at information we had. We had some input from advisory councils and talked with them several times about that. We had feedback from commissioners. We had input from community members. We also had information that we received from our call center calls to look at what the trends are and what the needs are. That is a consumers call in, individuals and professionals call into that line, and we can identify from there what are some of the needs that we're seeing. We also looked at our internally the current clients we're serving through our case management and other services, and our case management and other direct service staff to identify what those needs and gaps are and what those changing ones are. We also had to take into consideration staffing limitations. As I talked to you before during our budget presentation, we have been very challenged with our internal staffing, with vacancies and with the turnover and with the impact of a lot of very new staff. So that does limit what we're able to do internally with direct services. We also looked at alternative funding sources, and several weeks ago you all received a white paper and it talked about some of those alternative funding sources. We have our regular Older Americans Act, that is an allocation we receive every year. And we also have received quite a bit of COVID types of funding. We received CARES funding, FFCRA, HCA, the VAC-5 money, and then we've got the new ARPA money. Out of the majority of those, two of those, FFCRA and the HCAA, were 100% for nutrition programs. That's a combination of the congregate and the in-home program. Under ARPA and our regular Older Americans allocation, 49% of those funds are for nutrition. So we looked at other funding sources to see how that impacted needs and availability of service dollars. And then we also looked at whatever is the approved plan, how would we market that? And how would that be done? We do have a monthly meeting with what's called the Aging Network Group. We have about 80 people that attend or participate on a monthly basis, but we have a much larger email listserv for that group. So we send out information to them. We do monthly meetings. We also send out weekly notifications on Friday to keep them updated on all kinds of information, changes in services, changes in other community partner services. So that's a really active listserv, and it's a great way to get information out to all of the Aging Network, and through them also to the people they serve. So that's a really wide net. We also have other community providers and then social media as opportunities.
Hey, Annette, before you go on, you
Yes.
did mention about nutrition services, and I know that the folks from Meals on Wheels came and visited with each and every one of the commissioners here recently, and they needed some additional funding. Now, you and I have talked, and because I was concerned about that, and I was hoping that we could help them out somehow. From what I understand from what you just said, is that there is funding from ARPA that is going to go into nutrition services, and that can help with Meals on Wheels, in addition some funding coming down from the state. Is that correct, or did I
Right.
not understand what you said?
The $2.27 million budget that I brought to you last week for the ARPA dollars, that does include 49% of those dollars are for the nutrition programs. That's congregate and that's home delivered. That is, of course, to serve all 3 counties. Again, that money is also one-time only. It's available through September of 2024. So what we plan to do with that is work with our providers to talk about how we can utilize those funds in a way that doesn't put people at that cliff. And so looking, hopefully we want to work with them to look at some new ways of providing services, some other alternatives, maybe to test out some projects, so that there is money available for nutrition. And we will work with our advisory council and with our provider groups. And then ultimately, whatever that plan is has to be approved by Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, who approves all of the final funding recommendations. In addition to that, there's 2 other things. This year, at the end of the legislative session, the Kansas legislature appropriated $1.5 million. My understanding is that that is ongoing, but that is state-only dollars, and that is only for nutrition programs. So that will be allocated out. We have not heard from the state how they will be allocating that. We believe it'll come to the AAAs because the state does not have direct contracts with service providers. Typically, we get about 18% of state and federal funding based on our size and demographics. So that would be somewhere close to $300,000, I believe, for the nutrition programs. So, and then one final thing is we're working with the state of Kansas right now. They had some ARPA workforce dollars, and they came to the state association and wanted to know if we could help spend that money on workforce type of issues. So we have a proposal into them. There are four projects statewide that would be with the AAAs. And one of those projects would be with us, with our CP AAA, and it would be focused on nutrition. And it would be, that funding is available through September 2024 for a position. And the goal of that would be to focus on research on best practices, research on pilot projects, research at the national level. There's a national there's a national clearinghouse on nutrition programs. There's also a annual Administration for Community Living funds pilot projects, and then working with our nutrition providers to come up with some new and efficient models for nutrition. Because what we do know is that the need for services will continue to grow as the population ages, but that the dollars will not keep up with that growth. So we need to be able to start looking at some new models, some new service methods, some new efficiencies, some new ways of doing the business so that we can continue to meet the needs of the most at-risk and the most in need for these nutrition programs. So we have submitted that proposal to KDADS last week, and hopefully we'll be hearing from them very soon. So we're quite hopeful for that, because we really do need to start looking at some new models and some new ways to do business so that we can continue to meet nutrition needs.
Very good. Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that they took time out to come and speak to each and every one of the commissioners. I've seen articles in the newspaper. It's a need that I wanted to make sure that was fulfilled, and it looks like that it may not come from Sedgwick County, but if we can keep advocating for it, why there are some other avenues that they can get the funding that they need to keep the programs operating. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. So are you saying that we'll be able to fund the $200,000 that Meals on Wheels has asked for?
No, we have to look at, when we look at the ARPA dollars, we'll have to look at the region-wide and look at proposals and look at the needs. So one of the things we have to look at is how to utilize those dollars to best meet the community need of the individuals who need the meals. So we don't look particularly at the needs of providers, but more at the needs of the client served. So that will be taken into consideration, because I know that all of our nutrition providers across the three-county region are experiencing the same issues with increased cost due to the food, gas prices, volunteers, and just wages.
Okay, so my next question would be, you said a couple of different times that we need alternatives, we need new efficient models. What are a few of those? I mean, what are a few of those examples that you could share with us right now?
Well, there are some programs that have looked at ways to provide meals, just deliver it once a week and provide 5 meals at a time. That way you cut down your delivery time and you do it in regions. There are frozen meal options. There are the Mom's Meals program delivers those meals. You can do once a week or every 2 weeks. You can get up to 2 meals a day, and they're delivered by FedEx or a Mom's Meals truck locally. Then some of those are just things where they're providing meals at different locations where older adults already are at. There's what they call the CHAMPS program in the state of Kansas, and we do have one of those at the Susan B. Allen Hospital, where funds are provided to the hospital, and older adults can qualify for the program, and they can go to the hospital cafeteria and eat there with this voucher that provides them that they get only specified meals, because the meals provided under the federal nutrition program have to meet 1/3 of the required daily allowance. There are some other places in Kansas, other AAAs, who have worked with grocery stores, like would be similar to Dillon's, where they can go and get the meal there. And then there are some other ones that have gone to local restaurants in smaller communities and use those vouchers there. Now, those are congregate programs, but there's, a lot of other things that we would need to look at through this project.
So for those living in social isolation, how does delivering a meal for 5 days help them?
There are some ways to pair that with callers, where you would have somebody call them on a regular basis, maybe 3 times a week. It is not ideal. It isn't that in-person contact, but there are different ways, maybe using the virtual platforms, or just the old-fashioned call. So there's different things that we would need to look at and really do some research, but I know that there's been a lot of work. As I said, every year the Administration for Community Living does fund pilot projects to figure out new ways of doing this to address the issue of limited funding and increased need.
Well, I look forward to hearing these alternatives and these new efficient models. When do you think that those will be? When do you think we'll be able to read that report?
Well, we still have to wait on KDAD's approval for this position, and then that would be through September of 2024. So the final report would be in September of 2024 after they gather all the information, work with community partners, and look at that.
So as far as the need right now, what is the plan for that? I mean, we have people right now that need meals, and so I hope that we're able to meet the needs of those that are needing it today. 2024 is
Right.
quite a ways off.
And we will be working with the ARPA funds, and when that allocation of the state dollars, our portion of the $1.5 million, we will be working on figuring out how to allocate that to best meet the needs.
To the 3-county region.
Yes, those are for the 3-county region, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
So the recommended expenditures we bring for you today are, and this is $500,000. I'm sorry I did not put the total there, but it is the full $500,000. It is a replacement of a transit vehicle for $135,000, food boxes at $50,000, hearing aids $130,000, eyeglasses $60,000, and utility assistance at $125,000. So for the vehicle replacement, the Sedgwick County Transportation has a total of 7 vehicles. Of those, 3 vehicles have mileage that are beyond the established useful life of the vehicle, and all 3 are now requiring costly repairs, like engines, transmissions, very high-cost repairs. Now, because this is a replacement vehicle, it would require no additional maintenance or other costs because that's already built into the budget because it's a replacement. So all of the current vehicles have plans and have the funding attached to them to provide for the maintenance and other costs, driving and the drivers and all of that. Now, we know that with a replacement vehicle, maintenance costs would decrease due to the current high maintenance costs for the vehicle that this would be replaced. So, the vehicles that are purchased with Kansas Department on Transportation funds are limited to rural-focused transit. This is a Sedgwick County-only program for the KDOT funds. A Sedgwick County-funded vehicle would allow for greater flexibility to serve individuals in the metropolitan statistical area, which includes the city of Wichita and several cities in the nearby area surrounding Wichita, what they refer to as newly urbanized. And those areas are Derby, Mulvane, Hayesville, Goddard, Mays, Valley Center, Park City, Keachai, and Bel Air. So a KDOT vehicle, we're required to use those in the rural areas. So that's outside that circle around Wichita. So they go out there and we pick up people, bring them into the city, because usually that's where they're coming for services, either employment or grocery stores or medical care, hospitalization, social services, those kind of things. And then we take them back. But we're prohibited from using that within the city of Wichita to transport in the city or from those newly urbanized areas in and out. So there's a big unmet need there. So this vehicle would allow more flexibility to meet those kind of needs that we are seeing that do exist. So
Just a moment.
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Howell?
You know, thank
Yes.
you, Chairman. That last sentence you just said, that you said they can't use these vehicles to bring people in and out. What did you say exactly?
If with the vehicle that was purchased with Sedgwick County funds, then you could move people around in those areas.
But if someone in one of those areas needs to come to Wichita,
Yes,
that's okay.
yeah.
Okay.
If it's a vehicle purchased with Sedgwick County funds, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The ones for KDOT, though, they can't be used to bring someone from an outlying area to the Wichita area?
Yeah, they bring them to Wichita and then back, but you can't transport people from that newly urbanized area or then the Wichita.
Within the city?
If the trip originates in the newly urbanized area or the city of Wichita and they're not going back out, if they're just moving around in that area, the newly urbanized area of the city of Wichita, we can't use the KDOT vans for that.
Is there a map that defines the areas that are serviceable by this program?
By the KDOT
Well, you could be using the word urbanized area. I don't know exactly what that means, so I don't know if there's a map that describes that term geographically.
The newly urbanized, yeah, we can
Yeah.
get that for you. Mhm.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, the next one is the nutrition boxes. This would serve individuals at the 200% of poverty level or under who are unable to go to the store and have no or limited caregiver support. So they don't really have anybody who can go and do their grocery shopping who can get food for them. This is modeled after a program we did with some of our CARES funding, the federal dollars, and with that we provided food boxes, and then we worked with a provider who purchased the food, packed the boxes, and then we used some volunteers and some staff to help deliver those. It was a very successful program. People really appreciated it. We served about 220 people with that program. Some of those people received a one-time only box, and some received a monthly box. So it depended on their need and what they really, wanted. Did they want it just once? Is that what they need? Did that fill their need? Now, these programs are all for people age 60 and older. I forgot to mention that. So each box, as in the previous program, include meat, fruit, vegetables, and grains. This will provide meals for approximately 2 weeks. Now, when we did it before, it was around $35, $27, $35, $40, depending on what was purchased for that box. We've, based on the inflation, we're thinking now it'll probably be around $50 a box. The department staff would receive referrals and determine eligibility. And we would work with a community provider to purchase the food, put the boxes together, and coordinate the volunteers and help kind of map out for the volunteers. And we could help recruit volunteers. Now, previously, when we did this program, we had our staff could identify some of their own clients who needed the box because we have a fairly significant number of individuals we serve with case management and through some of our other programs. So in those situations, sometimes we would have them deliver the food box when they were going out for a visit. As I said, the boxes would be provided dependent on need, once or monthly. So this really helps address that nutrition issue. It's a different way of doing it, but it does address the issue of nutrition in older adults and that need. So for the hearing aids, a maximum amount of $2,000 per person. It would serve individuals at 200% of poverty level who are in need of hearing aids and could document the need for that. The department would contract with a community provider to manage eligibility and coordination of service delivery. And I know that the $2,000 seems small. I have been out to Costco recently, and I do know that the costs range at Costco, not that I'm, saying, but they could work with Costco. The costs range from $13.39 to $24.99 for a pair. And it's very similar to ones that you can go to. And I know I have a hearing aid. So one I bought 3 years ago cost $5,000 for the pair. And it's very similar to that with the phone app and the rechargeable. And that includes the ear chuck, the hearing test, and a 2-year warranty. So that would be a way that people could really cover the full cost of that. And we do, and that does address health and wellness issues. So as we look at health and wellness, and we know that Medicare does not cover
Just a
hearing
moment.
aids. Oh, yes,
What's the membership to Costco?
$60.
You have to have a membership.
$60.
Do they do service calls?
You can go back in there and have them clean it, and yes, yeah, so all of that is included. So I did go in and check on that. So that is a way to address the health and wellness needs and also social isolation. A big factor in social isolation is not being able to hear. If you can't communicate people, you can be around people all the time, but you're not able to communicate. So this really addresses health, wellness, and social isolation. Eyeglasses. Maximum amount of $500 per person. It would serve individuals, again, at the 200% of poverty level and in need of eyeglasses. And we would contract with a community provider to manage the eligibility and coordination of service delivery. Again, this is a service not covered by traditional Medicare. Poor vision impacts a lot of things. It impacts social isolation, health and wellness, even nutrition, and falls. A lot of times, poor vision will result in falls. So we really think that this would meet multiple of needs through this program. Utility assistance. So this is $500 maximum per household. Income guidelines at 200% of poverty level. Excludes individuals who've already received the LEAP program in 2022 to help pay overdue utility bills. And again, the department would seek to contract with a community provider to manage eligibility and coordinate the service. We know there are about 3 or 4 different providers, community providers, that already provide this service. We know that the need is great, and we think that we might be able to work with one of them to have them provide the service for individuals 60 and older. We know that homelessness is on the rise among older adults, and if you can't pay your bills and you can't pay those kind of things, then it could result in homelessness. And we know the importance, especially the last few days with the high heat, we know the importance of being able to have your utilities on and be able to pay those bills. So again, that addresses health and wellness issues among older adults. So these are the staff recommendations we're bringing to you for the contingency funding. We thank you for this opportunity, not only for having the funds that you allocated for the needs of older adults, and we thank you for being able to kind of revise, listen to feedback, and present this funding recommendations. The needs for services for older adults in Sedgwick County are our first priority as we work towards finalizing allocations of these one-time only funds. We do understand that this is a policy decision, and I am here for Commissioner guidance on how to allocate these contingency funds generously granted by the Board of County Commission, and we are ready to proceed with the necessary actions after we have your recommendations, feedback, and approval.
Well, thank you, Annette. I really appreciate the briefing and the update on how to use the $500,000 of contingency fund that we approved in the 2022 budget. I completely agree that the idea of a transit vehicle that you can work within the metro area is something that's needed, and I concur with that idea. The food boxes, again, goes back to what my question was earlier on making sure that we provide the nutrition services for our seniors. And I did talk to you about the Meals on Wheels, but I am very happy that you're going to be able to work with Meals on Wheels and with some of the ARPA funding and see if we can get that across. I did talk to them after they came around and spoke with us. They said that they asked for $200,000, but they said $100,000 would go a long ways towards meeting their needs. So if you can get anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000 out of ARPA funding, that would be wonderful. So I appreciate what you're looking at there. I concur that hearing aids are critical for quality of life. I wear 2 hearing aids. Without them, I can't hear anything. With them, I can barely hear. So it's honestly, it is a necessity if you're going to communicate with everyone around you. And so I appreciate the increase in the amount of money. You and I talked about hearing aids when the first idea came up out of the advisory council, and I said it wasn't enough money because of the expense that it costs for each hearing aid. So thank you for that. Again, eyeglasses is quality of life. You've got to be able to see, and utility assistance. So with the cost of everything going up with inflation where it's at today, that is critical. So I completely agree with all of your recommendations today, and I appreciate staff taking a look at this in depth. One of the concerns that I've had for a long time was actually the composition of your advisory board. And I think it's weighted heavily towards one area. You've got about 10 or 12 different things that are your responsibility or your mission for handling aging. But your advisory board is kind of stacked in one area and doesn't take into account all of these different things that you've just indicated today. So honestly, what I'd like for you and Tim and Mike Papoon and Tom Stoltz to take a look at is, do we need to go back and take a look at the composition by whatever we did it with resolution or whatever of the advisory board, and make sure that the advisory board is made up of people that not only receive services, but also provide services in all of the different areas, instead of having a number of people in one area and they have a bigger voice, and then we only hear one answer. I want to hear answers for everything that you do. And that's what you presented to us today. It's not everything you do, but it's some of the top issues that are involved in it. So that's my request, is to have you work with our staff and come up and see if we need to reimagine what our advisory board is so that they can give us advice. Because this is not what the advisory board gave us, but this is what was needed. And so I need an advisory board that's advising you and advising us that takes a look at the entire gamut of the Department of Aging and what they need to do to provide services to our seniors. Thank you. And Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this $500,000 was budgeted last year. Did we ever recalculate the mill levy equivalent for this after that was passed?
No, sir, we did not, but I can real quick.
I'd like to know what that is, yeah. I know we saw a number in the 2023 budget consideration on the long sheet, I guess I would say. I assume that has the amended number in it, I don't know. But, I think a lot of this is really good ideas. I especially like the hearing aids and the eyeglasses programs. I think that that's a huge deficiency in our community. I would point out that these are not, although these are greatly needed, I think is great ideas. They're not service programs. I mean, these are items that certainly enhance the quality of life, and I think they're very certainly needed by these folks. Going back to the ballot question in 1982, again, what was approved by the voters was up to 1 mil for service programs for the elderly. I think those are the exact words that were used. And so I think these are excellent choices, things to spend things on. I don't know how much of the budget is actually service programs. I'm just curious if we could break that out to see how much of our spending is service programs. You have a number there?
I don't, I have the mill levy equivalent.
Yeah, what's the mill levy equivalent now?
The mill levy equivalent is .090 for the 500,000.
I understand that. I'm saying the total, the total aging mill levy rate for the 2022 budget with the $500,000. I'd like to know what that number would be. And again, 1 mil generates around,
5.5.
let's say, $5.5 million. So
It is 0.482 for 2022.
okay, I'm sorry,
0.482.
0.482. Okay. And you said this, yeah, and this 500,000 was a 0.9.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, the 0.9 is making quite a bit of difference, and we're certainly helping a lot of folks with the 0.9, actually, not 0.9.
0.09.
Yeah, 0.09, that's the better number. I mean, that's correct. So 0.09
Yes.
mil is helping a lot of people. And I guess I would like to know I don't know if we have data out there that talks about the number of people in the audience that would need these types of services or would be qualified. We're not going to help because we don't have enough money to help the population that has these types of needs. Again, so there's, to put this out, for example, hearing aids, we're going to help 65 people with this program. That's again, it's great for 65 people, but there's a lot of people out there perhaps aren't going to get help because there's not enough money in the program to do that. So it'd be nice to know what the population is for these types of services. How many people are out there that need these types of helps? We're going to address 65 of them, for example, on that program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never seen data that would say how many people need hearing aids that don't access them. I mean, we know that. We can tell you what percentage of the population age 65 and older have hearing impairments or vision impairment, but those that don't, I haven't seen that data. But I did just want to clarify, when you look at that funding and you can divide it for those programs where we're contracting out, you can't just come up with the number, and that's why I didn't provide you the number of people served, because anybody we'll contract with will require some administrative and some funding to help them administer the program.
I just took the number you said, up to $2,000 per person.
Right.
And divide that by the number that's being allocated for that part of the program, and that means up to 65 people could get services. If each one used up to $2,000, that's as far as the money would go in that program.
Well, some of those dollars will be utilized by our contractors to administer the program.
So there's overhead, so it really won't be that many.
Right.
It'll be less than that. Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Again, I'm not 65 yet, so I'm not intimately involved with Medicare as a personal benefit. But Medicare, if I understand correctly, doesn't really deal with hearing aids, for example. They just don't provide that service.
Traditional Medicare does not, that's
And if
correct.
someone is in poverty level, and again, I think Costco has a great deal. It's a nice provider to do that. I had a friend who received hearing aids about 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't. I don't think he knew about Costco. It was $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 for his hearing aids.
Right.
At first, I had a World War II veteran, and he was a dear soul that needed hearing aids, and he tried for years to find someone who would help him provide hearing aids, and there was nothing. Nope. Some of these programs, there's duplication of. There's lots of food programs out there. For example, there's lots of people trying to find ways to get food, nutrition to seniors, but hearing aids, there is really very little provision out there for hearing aids. And so, again, I tried for years to try to find a solution to that hearing aids issue. And he finally did find something from the VA that finally did step up and help him out eventually, and he passed away. But I remember years he suffered with hearing loss, and it was a quality of life issue for him. And my heart breaks for someone like that. And so I just think, if there's nothing out there, to help, it said 65, but it won't even be, it will be less than 65, whatever that number is going to be. We have essentially a ballot question out there that compels us to be aware of the great need. And I think the people have essentially mandated to the commission that we have some obligation to our seniors. And so that's been my focus all along. I think these are great ideas, and I support what's been done so far. With respect to the Aging Advisory Council, I would like to, I don't know about the makeup of that. I haven't thought about that before, but I do think that having them take a greater role in trying to determine how these dollars should be allocated is certainly a good idea. And I think that they ought to be used more and more. So I don't know what extent they were used in this case. It was just a couple weeks ago. I think you brought us a whole other proposal, which was much different than this one, and this is much more detailed and uses the entire allocation now. But this is kind of an updated thing. It's just 2 weeks ago, I don't think it even existed. So did the Aging Advisory Council actually have a role to play in bringing this proposal to us today?
We gave them opportunities to provide input, and they did bring up the hearing aid issue and transportation, and I believe the glasses, and they talked about social isolation. So we really tried to address the needs that they identified. So we have not presented this to them yet. We had a meeting last week, but we wanted to bring it before you before we brought the finalized version to them.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you for the presentation, and I support what's been presented so far. I wish we could do more. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Annette, for this presentation and the work you've done. And it seems to fit. It's not going to be perfect, I'm sure, but I'm glad to see hard numbers here. So thank you. I'm in favor.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. So my question, I guess, is if we don't really know the need of hearing aids, how was the decision made to allocate $130,000 to that?
We do know the percentage of people that suffer hearing loss. We do know that we get lots of calls from the call center for people that need hearing aids. We know from the clients we serve. So we have data that shows that people experience hearing loss. We know the impact of hearing loss, and we also know that Medicare nor Medicaid pay for hearing aids. So there's a big gap. So when we identify gaps in services, that was a big gap.
Sure. Thank you for that. I don't disagree that hearing aids are important to fund. The article that ran on active aging produced a lot of emails to my inbox around how this money and ideas around how this money should be allocated, and almost every single one of them, about 15 total emails, mentioned transportation. And so I just wonder how we're weighing this money when it comes to, if we're doing a rank system here about what the more prevalent need is. I mean, everybody mentioned transportation. And so to weigh these, I mean, we're only spending $5,000 more on transportation than we are on hearing aids. So I guess I'm just wondering how we sort of came up with how much money we were going to put in these buckets. That's my main question. So would you say that the need for hearing aids is as great as transportation?
Transportation will always be a very huge need across all populations. At this point in time, as I've talked about before, it's really somewhat challenging to provide transportation because people are really struggling, providers, to get drivers. One of the people we have contracted with, was a cab company, and they are struggling a lot to get drivers. So people will sometimes wait 2 hours for a pickup. We have been trying to contract with providers, and we've gone through 3 different RFPs trying to get providers to contract with us because we can't provide for all of the need, and we need more access. And we are back at the starting table because they haven't come through and submitted bids. So we just recently had a meeting with the providers that had voiced interest that were out there who can provide the type of transportation for mobility impaired individuals. Usually that's door to door. And so we are now working with them and walking with them side by side to help them submit that. So it is a challenge to provide transportation. So that's why we came up with the idea for the vehicle, because it allows us then to have the flexibility and to provide ongoing more transportation for older adults. Secondly, we are in the process and hopefully coming to the conclusion. There was a bid put out. We got funding from Kansas Department on Transportation to do a study. And that study will be a very in-depth study of our transportation systems and programs, and to look at, are there efficiencies? Is there new software programming? Is there new ways to do it? Are there efficiencies, mapping? It will be a very in-depth study to help us identify ways to improve our transportation service. So we are taking efforts to try to figure out, and I did want to also just update you. We have finalized getting the system ready for the online application for rides. So we are getting ready to send information out to our current clients and others to tell them that there's a way that they can do that online. So I guess that's kind of a long answer to your question, but it is something certainly we're aware of, the need for more transportation, and we're approaching that from several different angles to try to figure this out. So this was just kind of the way we thought that we could address that. Now, is hearing aids more important? I don't know. I mean, I know that being hearing impaired is a terrible situation for an individual to be in. And because the costs are so high, that it really affects all of their life, and we see the deterioration in people from the social isolation and not being able to communicate. So it's hard to kind of weigh which one's more important.
Sure. I mean, I worked for a hearing aid company for 3 years. I did testimonials, video, recorded them. You know, I mean, I understand the need for hearing aids. I was just wondering how we kind of came up with this allocation per bucket here. I guess my other question would be, how long will this money be allocated? Is this indefinitely? So if we have $130,000 and then whatever it takes to administer the program, how many people can be helped for how long? How long will this money be available? And how do we plan to market it to our community?
It's one-time only funding. It'll be available through December 31st.
Okay, so if it's not spent by December 31st, it goes away.
That's correct.
Okay, so how do we plan to get, I mean, to Commissioner Howell's point, if it's 65 divided out, how many, if it takes us how much money to administer the program, how many people do you think that we're going to have to market to make sure that these funds are available to those who need this money?
We have, like I said, we have our aging network group. That's a very large net of agency of providers and individuals across all spectrums of the aging world. So it is home health, it is hospice, it is realtors, it is all spectrums, the nutrition providers, housing providers, senior centers. It is a very wide spectrum, and they touch literally thousands of people. So they will be a great marketing tool, and we will get information out to them. We're pretty confident that the providers that are available out there that kind of do some similar kind of work now already have access to clients in need. We have staff that serve people internally, our own client base, that we know have these needs. So I think that once word gets out, and because of the active aging article, there is lots of pent-up interest in how these funds are going to be allocated. So I'm sure that would be another platform from which people would be able to know about the programs that are available. So I really am pretty confident that these monies will all be spent.
Great. Well, I appreciate the work that it took to go, to make sure that we allocated all of these funds. There has been a lot of interest. So thanks, Annette. Appreciate it.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, Annette. Thank you very much for the
Thank
briefing.
you.
I appreciate it. And one clarification, we do have a third item today. Jim Weber is here and is going to talk a little bit about flood control. That's going to have to go in our budget. So next item, Mr. Manager.
Let's go ahead and let Jim go. And we're meeting with you all in one-on-one meetings this week regarding budget. A couple of you we've not met with yet, but we did meet with some of you yesterday. Jim's going to talk about just some of the challenges in the floodway control budget. As you know, we're partners with the city of Wichita on the management of that. I just wanted to give him a chance this morning to brief commissioners on that. So, Jim.
As usual, I need assistance, so.
Morning, Jim.
I'll just start. I know one of the questions is about the pump stations, and so we pulled up this map, and more bigger. It's a little hard to tell on here, but basically the flood control system, the big ditch, kind of starts down here at Derby at the river, follows this around, and you'll see these red dots, which are the pump stations, and it comes around, and up here is where the get up into Park City, and it all branches out. And so the pump stations, there are 7 pump stations that are part of the flood control system. And you probably have seen a lot of them and didn't recognize what they were, but for example, this one right here, which is just south of 235 on Zoo Boulevard, there's a large detention pond there right north of Presbyterian Manor, and there's a big brick building out there. That's a pump station. So there are several that are sandwiched in between the big ditch and I-235. If you follow it down, you'll see these. One of them is At Maple, just west of town west, literally draining that part of town. The pump stations, when we build the levee system, what we've done is, in some places, we've trapped water. If it rains on us, we've trapped water outside of the levee, which if it's farm ground, it would drain to the levee and go on through the outlet pipes that run into the levee. The pipes are gated with a redundant system, and if they get into a flood condition, then the gates are closed, and everything that rains on the outside of the levee is trapped outside of the levee. In an agricultural situation, that's not really too big of a deal. There were what they called ponding areas identified where it was just accepted this would be an area that would flood. With development, though, that's a problem. And so these pump stations, for the most part, are taking, we've got this trapped water that comes to the levee system. It's now in storm sewer systems. It's too deep just to run into the system, so they're literally picking up the storm water and dumping them over into the levee. See, some places don't need it. If you're up north here, it would naturally is not trapped. It gets to the big river and goes through town. We've got a big area that's trapped down here, kind of where Hayesville and Wichita come together. There's a pretty good-sized pump station down there. And so they are part of the system. They're inspected by the Corps of Engineers on a regular basis because they're needed to keep the land side of the levee dry. This would be a lot like, think, very small version of New Orleans, okay, where you've literally got to pump it to get it out of the protected area. So they have, I'll go ahead to the budget part of this issue, I guess. They had, I guess for years, maybe forever, the cost of these pump stations has been kind of buried in the city's stormwater operation. In late 2021, I would say, after the last budget was done, there was a realization that that's a cost that actually should be attributed to the floodway system. They made a budget adjustment in 22 to create some funding for power costs for these. It's not enough, but it was trying to get that cost back where it belongs, which is a part of the system. So when you look at the numbers that you've seen, maybe you haven't all seen them, but there's about a $600,000 increase. So $400,000 of that, $395, is the power cost to run these 7 pump stations. They had rearranged their budget this year. They've got about $265 lined up in there for power costs, but they've had to take it from some other places. So this is just kind of catching up with us. Plus, power costs have gone up. So we've got a kind of a two-step fee in the power part of it. So that's about 2/3 of the $600,000 increase that you're seeing. And I can certainly try to go deeper on the pump stations if you want. But
Well, I appreciate that. When I was going through the budget with Tom and Lindsay, I didn't know what it was for. And so I had some questions, and the other part that I had questions about was when we found out about it. So hopefully next year the city engineer and the county engineer can talk early enough that we kind of program this into our budget rather than finding out about it about a week before the manager publishes his budget that he's going to give to us. So please, I don't like surprises, and I didn't even know what this was for, so I appreciate it, and I understand why that this would be needed. So thank you for the briefing. Do any commissioners have any questions? I don't see any.
if they come up later, let me know.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you all.
Chairman, Sheena's going to get up and just kind of give an overview on some compensation plan, and while she's going to the podium, I know we had some concerns from corrections employees. The plan for staff, as you recall, the commission on June 1 approved a grant from the state of Kansas that would cover the last quarter of the state fiscal year, April, May, June. We thought we would be getting notification from the state for the grant moving forward post July 1 before June 15th, before this coming Wednesday, tomorrow's meeting, and we have not. So that has been delayed till June 22nd. I think it's important, and we'll send a note and confirm this with the correction staff. There's a plan. We know the state's going to approve this. It's in the budget, but we have not received official notification from the state yet to allow the commission to accept the grant. So that will be scheduled for next Wednesday, 8 days from today, and so we'll put out some information. I think some employees thought that maybe it was not going to happen, and that's not true. We're just waiting on the state to notify us. So Sheena, do you want to kind of talk through?
Sure. Thank you. Again, just on the June 1st, as Tom stated, we have those changes made into the system. The Department of Corrections is going to be addressing those employees and letting them know who is affected and by how much, and that will be on their next paycheck on June 24th. So that was not delayed. We simply had to go back, once the approval was given, go back and look at all the actions up until April 1st, and we've got those into the system. It's been loaded, and it will be reflective on the June 24th pay period. Also on June 22nd coming up, we will be moving to accept that state grant award for fiscal year 23. We'll also be asking you to formally accept the new corrections pay plan. And we will also talk about mid-year adjustments and also some reclasses coming up on the 22nd. So again, lots of moving pieces, and we're adjusting those as we get the information in, but everything is still in play, and employees will be notified once everything is finalized.
Very good. Well, thank you, Sheena. I know there was some concern, but I wanted to make sure that it was in an open session that we could let everyone know that these are still in process, that we will work them, but we had to have the funding before that we could vote on it.
Yes.
And so we will have this on our agenda coming up on the 22nd, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? I don't see any. Mr. Manager? Commissioners, I have one thing I'd like to talk about a little bit before we adjourn. We've had a lot of budget problems as we move into 2023. And one of the things that I know Commissioner Howell mentioned the other day when we were talking with the fire was that we have to look at efficiencies. And efficiencies we need to look at it everywhere. So it's imperative that we look at different ways of doing business to bring about efficiency for our citizens, and where possible, cost savings in addition to that, and that's the most important part of the efficiencies. So I want to address an idea that we've discussed before, but what we need is to analyze and study all of the row offices, the county clerk, register of deeds, county treasurer, and their operations and efficiencies that might be obtained. I want to express my utmost respect for the office of the treasurer, register of deeds, and county clerk, and what Treasurer Brandy Bailey, register of deeds Tanya Buckingham, and county clerk Kelly Arnold do for our citizens on a daily basis. They serve a vital function in the role of county government. This type of analysis is done commonly in our organization, review, analyze, study our county operations to realize if there are any duplication of services or considerations for methods or procedures to provide service delivery in a more efficient and cost-effective manner. I've talked with the county manager, and he's talked with the commissioners, and I think that there is a number of commissioners that would like to engage a firm that can assist in this. Baker Tilly of our municipal advisors can conduct a cursory review of this analysis and a study of their operations. If this study indicates that efficiencies can be obtained, and there are several more steps that would be required to include a public hearing, a vote by the commissioner, a vote by the citizens in Sedgwick County before any change could be made. So I don't want to get people completely worried at this point. There's a lot of steps that have to go. But I think that this is something that we need to take a look at, especially with the pressures on our 2023 budget. What you're going to see when the manager presents his 2023 budget coming up here first part of July is that we're going to see pay raises, which are needed because we are so short on so many different areas. But as far as a lot of the other decision packages that we heard during the process, we're not going to hear those as part of his budget. And so we have to look at efficiencies because 2024, we're just going to carry a lot of those decision packages forward. And any pay raises we give this year are going to carry forward. So we need to take a long-range look at where else we can look at efficiency. So I just wanted to let everyone know, and if there's any questions from the commission, that I think that a study for efficiencies is something that's needed. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curiously, if this was to go forward, is it your intent, this would be the November election this year?
It would have to be the November election.
It has to be a gubernatorial cycle general election, correct?
That's correct.
So we have from now, and when would that have to be submitted to the election office for that to be on the November ballot?
Mike, Boone County Councilor, I've talked to the election commissioner, and we would have to get the question to her by September 1.
And so Chairman, you're talking about doing a study to determine whether efficiencies would be possible. And what's the process to do that study, and what's the time frame for that study to become accomplished? Or how would we do that?
If the commission has the will, we would hire an entity to do that efficiency study for us. Johnson County has a model we would look at, and they would work internally with the rural offices here to get that study done, clearly in 8 weeks. So.
Okay. Now, do we have any evidence right now if there's inefficiencies that have caused this conversation to be initiated at this point?
We've talked about this for a while. The only evidence is just from discussion with Johnson County officials, and Mike can weigh in on that too, where they did realize some efficiency and cost savings. I don't know whether Sedgwick would yield that or not, which is why we'd want to do the analysis here.
Generally speaking, do we have I don't know if Sheena's not in the room, but do we have a ballpark comparison of what director of agency salaries are versus elected official salaries are in these departments? In other words, if you were a director of, say, the clerk's office, for example, what would that person make versus what's the elected official make?
Well, I don't know what the analysis would show, whether we would need 3 directors or we go to 1 director, or it'd be assimilated into a director that already exists. But I would tell you that the elected officials in the row offices, at least, are compensated probably on an average less than department directors, or probably in the 105 to 115 range, and the electeds are at around 96 currently.
So just in case the public's listening into this conversation, that we use the word row office, that's kind of an internal slang here. So we're talking about the county elected treasurer, the county elected county clerk, and the county register of deeds. Those 3 positions would potentially be administrative under the manager rather than elected officials that answer to the people directly. And so the difference would be, right now those offices are managed by the elected officials, and instead the proposal is if this would be something that goes forward, they would be managed by the manager's office with staff selected and hired by the manager. Is that correct?
I think the analysis would give recommendation on it. That's definitely one scenario, but it'd be interesting, right? I don't know what the analysis would yield if we had a third party come in and just take a look at operations. That is the way they did it in Johnson County. That's the only working model I have to compare it to.
All right. So I'll just state a philosophical position. I don't know that I will ever support. I don't know that efficiencies is the reason to make a change in these particular offices. I think philosophically that having elected officials that answer directly to the people is a preferred model of government, and you might be able to find some efficiencies. I would just argue that government generally is generally inefficient, and if you look at any agency anywhere, and our current agencies we have that are even under the manager for that matter, we can find efficiencies everywhere. So to the extent we can find inefficiencies, I would not be surprised by that result. I think that is not necessarily a compelling argument to go forward. I think the model of government is that we have elected officials for a reason, and they answer to the people directly. So I can tell you that I've enjoyed the fact that when people call up and say they're mad about the tag office, I can say, I appreciate your concern. I agree with your concern, but we have an elected official whose job it is to manage that tag office. If we change this, it does then come to the Board of County Commissioners at that point, because we are essentially then taking over control of the tag offices, for example. So it's fundamentally structural government's actually changing from one elected official to the Board of County Commissioners. through the manager's office. And so I do think that this conversation, now that it's out there, needs to be understood and discussed by the public early. I don't know how much money a study will cost. I don't want to spend a lot of money on a study if there's not an interest by the board and by the public that this is a good consideration for us to go down that path. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Hey, I don't see any other comments on that. One final thing that I'd like to bring up is when we were talking about the 2022 budget with Lindsay and Lorian and Tom yesterday, they reminded me that the election office already has a budget for 2022, and our election commissioner indicated when she was briefing her decision packages that she wanted to send out a letter or a postcard or something to every registered voter before the election saying that there's an election coming up, and if you want an advance ballot, you can get an advance ballot. And I told her at the time, and I talked about it, that I do not support sending out something that's not required by statute. I truly want every person that's eligible to vote to have an opportunity to vote. But any money that she spends this year can't be carried forward to next year. And I do not believe that spending money to send out a notice that's not required by statute is what I support. Now, if we have to bring it up before the Board of County Commissioners and put it on an agenda, I'll do that, or we can have a manager talk to her and find out what her will is. But I do not support spending GF money to just remind people that there's an election coming up. They should know that, but if they don't, then there's a problem. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It actually goes further than that because it's actually a application for a mail ballot. And it goes out to every single registered voter, regardless of whether they have a history of voting or not. And I think that Sedgwick County, I believe, is the only county in the entire state of Kansas that actually spends this money and does this, as a practice. It was started years ago because they reduced the number of poll sites, and they thought if they could get people to do more mail ballots, they could manage the day of the election a little bit better by having less of a crowd on election day. It's a policy choice that was made. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that this is not money we should spend. I think people are aware of the election, and I think that the private sector, both candidates as well as organizations, have a great interest in getting out their electorate, and they do everything they can to communicate with them to get them out to vote. At the end of the day, I don't know there's anybody that is unaware of the election. And in terms of efficiencies, we talk about efficiencies. People can request a mail ballot online, and through your smartphone, for example, you can do it very easily. It doesn't require mailing things back and forth, the cost of the taxpayers. I think that 21st century technology, we don't need to spend $100,000 or more to send out a notification that, frankly, is not really very useful. It tells people things they already know, and then things they can already do on their phone efficiently without actually having to spend money on both mailing things out and mailing things back and all that. It just frankly is unnecessary. So I do agree with you on this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that August 2nd is a special election. It's not just a primary, and so anybody who is a registered voter can vote in this election. If you are an unaffiliated voter, you'll just get the constitutional amendment ballot. So be sure to register to vote, and also register online if you'd like a advanced ballot, because you can vote in this upcoming August 2nd election if you are a registered voter, no matter of party.
Thank you. Let me clarify that a little bit more. The form that you fill out in order to be able to get an advanced ballot is really written and says, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And it doesn't have a place if you're unaffiliated to be able to check so that you only get the ballot for the constitutional amendment. We talked to the election commissioner about this issue. And so if you're a Republican, check the Republican box. If you're a Democrat, check the Democrat box. If you are neither, don't check any box, and you will get the appropriate ballot. So just because there's not a box that says unaffiliated, that doesn't mean that you cannot ask for an advanced ballot. It will be sent to you. If you happen to mark Republican and you're unaffiliated, they look at your registration and say, oh, this person is not a Republican, not a Democrat, they are unaffiliated, they will send you the ballot for unaffiliated. So I just wanted to clarify to make sure that everyone can apply for an advance ballot, and when it comes time to vote, everyone can vote. Commissioner Cruz.
So could, this form that we have on our website right here, why couldn't we just change it to have an unaffiliated box? I mean, it's our Sedgwick County
Because it's required by
form.
statute.
So we can't change this form that is our form here.
We cannot change it according to the election commissioner.
Okay, it doesn't say anything about this being a state form on here. Should we perhaps have that on here?
Well, we
Being
can
a
talk to
state
the
form?
election commissioner. Commissioner Howell, maybe you have an answer.
Well, I was just going to say, they were pretty clear in the email yesterday that this is prescribed by the Secretary of State, I think, under Kansas law. We can't just change these forms at our own leisure, but you don't want to forget our libertarian friends. They also have the same challenge, but it doesn't matter which box you check. You can check no box at all. They're going to check your registration regardless of what you think you're registered as. It doesn't really matter what you are registered as. If you're a registered voter, period, you can fill out this form and actually ignore that line completely. They're going to check your registration and send you the appropriate ballot. The Republicans will get a Republican ballot with Republican choices on it and the constitutional amendment. And the Democrats will get the Democrat ballot with the Democrat choices and a constitutional amendment. Our libertarian friends and unaffiliated friends, they'll get a constitutional amendment ballot only. So it's going to be handled by the election office. We don't have to worry about that. Just fill out the form and ignore that line or ask you for your party because it doesn't really matter. Thank you.
So is there a way to check, Mr. Papoon, if this form was signed off by? I just like to check. This is a question that I think I've received. I know I've received this question from a few folks about this form. So I'd just like to verify this form and how it's produced and how it's signed off and the regulation behind this form.
I'll be happy to do that, Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, it was a busy day. Thanks for everyone. Appreciate it. Have a good day.